Welcome to Bold Beginnings, where we teach and show you how God works in our careers, what His purpose is for us, and why we should trust Him in everything that we do. My name is Reta Wilson.
And I'm Sandra Fernandez.
And we are here today to talk about unforgiveness.
Yes. / forgiveness.
Yes. Unforgiveness / forgiveness.
Yes.
How do you feel about that topic?
What's up, Rita?
What's up, girl?
It's us this time.
It is.
I feel pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I love it. Unforgiveness. This is a really tough one for me because I've experienced it, right? I think all of us, or most of us, have experienced it.
Like at one point or another.
At one point in our life, we've had to forgive somebody for something, right? So I'm just going to start off with Matthew 6, 14, 15,
Okay.
right? For if ye forgive man, for if ye forgive man their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if ye forgive not man their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Okay? That really stuck out to me. I think it is hard for us to forgive and just let go, right? And I've struggled with it I don't want to say my whole life, but basically my whole life. So unforgiveness blocks the flow of freedom and healing. And I think when we have a lot of just like hurt and pain and just unforgiveness, we are not going to be able to be free. Like, you can't be free when you're holding on to so much like hate and anger, right? And it's obviously hard for you to heal because it's still there. Right? What are your thoughts on that?
I would definitely agree. I think it's something that sometimes you don't even know you have unforgiveness. You know what I mean? But I think that when, like, if there's a person that you're holding unforgiveness with, or, you know, I think you feel it. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you don't really think it, but then when that person comes around, like, you feel it. And you're like, okay, there's obviously something there that's unresolved, you know? And I think that's a fair statement, you know, with the freedom of it, because you really can't, because the anger and the resentment and the bitterness, it keeps you hostage. Right. And nobody likes to feel those things, but yet we still feel them, you know? Right. So I think it's an option, you know, it's a choice to forgive somebody. But it's a very powerful choice, you know? And a lot of times we hear like, they don't deserve my forgiveness, you know, but it's really not them. It's freeing yourself from what they did, or, you know, whatever the situation is. And, but I think it's one of the most powerful things is forgiveness, you know, and one of the things that I feel like is even stronger is forgiving ourselves, you know, for, you know, holding on to things, or for, we could be our biggest critics, like you said, you know, and I think we need to learn to forgive ourselves as well, you know, even for making those choices that we're not so proud of, and having that compassion for that person that we were in that moment that chose to do those things, and forgiving that part of you.
Right. I totally agree. Healing is important. And with me, just from personal experiences, when I wasn't moving forward in my life, I was struggling with why I felt so stagnant and why I wasn't moving forward and what was going on. And, you know, you tend to say, like, yeah, I forgive you, right? But do you really, right? Are we just saying it so we can just kind of get it out of the way, or do we truly forgive that person? But when I realized like I wasn't healing and I wasn't moving forward in my life, I had to take a step back and realize, okay, you know, I still haven't forgiven. These are the things that are still like hurting me, and I need to like figure this out. That's when
Right.
I went back and dig deeper into my Bible. So, and one of the things I've also experienced is like if you hold on to unforgiveness, like that can open the doors for like demons and really, really bad things. From my personal experience, I've gotten to a point where like I almost like hate it. Like you start to grow hate for someone because you
Right.
haven't forgiven them, right? There's that unforgiveness there. So I think if you hold on to unforgiveness long enough, it could open the door to just really, really bad things that you weren't expecting.
Totally, because you build a narrative and you build a story in your head of that person or the situation or, you know what I mean, that isn't true most of the time, you know what I mean? And then that creates even more emotion,
Right.
you know? And when those emotions take root, then that's definitely where those bad things creep in, and then you just start acting crazy.
Right. Acting crazy. Did you hear that?
Acting crazy. Yeah.
No, I agree with you 100%. And we spend so much time in anger and creating a grudge instead of just letting go and letting it go. You know, once I was able to forgive fully, I just felt like this weight off my shoulders. And it was just like, I was like, wow, so this is how it really feels, right? This is not me just saying, well, I forgive you, right? I was able to feel free and feel that weight and burden off my shoulders.
Right.
So
Yeah.
It's
So how do you let go?
how do I let go?
Like, what has been like your experience with like letting go?
Lots of prayer, right? And I think unforgiveness is like this, like it was literally like this cloud over me, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
this darkness in a sense, hovering over me. And I got to the point where I was just like, okay, so you either need to let go and let God, or you're going to be dealing with this the rest of your life, or for however long I choose to continue to hold on to this. And
Right.
almost you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is this really worth me not healing? Is this really worth me not moving forward? Is this really worth it? So, you know, to me, it wasn't worth it, right? At that point. And I kind of had to find myself constantly saying I forgave that person for the same thing. I think it's a continuous thing because sometimes your heart genuinely forgives, but then a situation comes up or something triggers it, right? And then you're thinking about it and then you're kind of back in that space. So when those things happen, I had to say, okay, Lord, I'm back here. I already forgave. I need you to help me forgive again, right? So I'm able to let go of this. I don't
Right.
want this to like hold me back and like have a hold on my future.
Right.
So that was kind of my experience. Like I will forgive and I will be in a good place until something triggers that, and then I will have to revisit it and re-forgive again. So it was a continuance thing for me, right? Constantly in prayer,
Yeah.
in my scriptures, and you know, just trying to let it completely go. And I remember when those things didn't trigger me anymore, right? Where I didn't get back into that space. So,
Right.
but just constantly being in my Bible and asking God for support and help to let it go. once you forgive, you start the process, right? Of completely like forgiving that person. Once you say, I forgive you, you start the process. It doesn't happen immediately. It's not going to happen overnight. It's obviously going to take time. But in the process, right, of it, that's when the triggers and things can happen.
Right.
And that's when I was, constantly praying in my head, reading my Bible, and so forth. So, and that was able to help me completely get over it, where when those triggers do come up, it didn't affect me anymore because I truly have let it go and forgiven.
Right. And I think God does that. There's that saying that's like, I can forgive, but I won't forget.
Right.
And like, technically, like sometimes you really don't forget what happened, but
Right.
you do get to a point where it's not like if I see that person, that's the first thing that pops up is what you did to me.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like you do get to a point where you're like, hey, and whatever happened, that's not the most number one thing you think about.
Right. Well, and if you see that person and you think about what they've done to you, then you haven't
forgiven them. Yeah.
Right?
And it does, and it takes time. And that's what I mean is like that like you called it a trigger, right? And there is, like, if you feel something, it's because there's still something there, right? And I think that, I mean, it happens, like we can be like, yeah, like it's cool, it's whatever. But then when you see that person, it's like, actually, no, you really did hurt me. And I am really hurt by what happened, But I feel like for me, in my experience, it's been, I feel like God likes to like humble me a lot. And then in that process, I've always learned to like take responsibility for your part, right? And there's a part where I would almost take responsibility for the other person too. But that kind of pushed me to go into this whole other thing. But learning to take responsibility for our part, you know what I mean? Like, I can't control what you chose to do. I can't control any of the outcome that happened because it already happened. But I can take responsibility for my part of the situation, whether you feel like you were so wronged, whether it's something that like you really had it, it's and like in an abusive situation, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's easy, and I want to be like very sensitive about this, but it's easy to be like, that happened to me. Right? And especially as a minor, you know what I mean? But I do believe that you can fully forgive a person that has taken advantage of you. And I also do believe that in that people would say like, well, I didn't do anything. You know what I mean? And it's not that you did something, but now it becomes your responsibility to heal that part and to forgive that person. That's your responsibility. You know what I mean? And I think that like that's super important to do when forgiving. And I feel like that has made forgiving somebody a lot easier for me is knowing that there's a responsibility on my part. Does that make sense? And it's also very humbling, because even not just in an abusive situation, but in other, situations, we're not perfect. You know what I mean? If somebody comes at me, like, obviously there's going to be pride, there's going to be ego, there's going to be that wall that's like there to protect you, right? And so how you handle yourself, that's your responsibility. You know what I mean? So in forgiveness, I feel like God has been like, okay, they did this, but you did it this way, and you did this. So it doesn't make you any better. Does that make sense? And so that's always been very humbling. And there's just been like so many situations where I've gotten to the point where what they did doesn't, like I said, it's not the first thing that pops up. And I know that because I would get to a point where I would see this person, like these people, and my blood would like just go through the roof
You're
and I
boiling.
would like lose it all over again. You know what I mean?
Right.
But then it gets to a point where you see them and now you can have a conversation. Now it's like, how are you doing?
Right.
Like, you don't have to be friends with the person, but like, you can be respectful and acknowledge the person and have a conversation with the person, because at the end of the day, like, they're also human, you know?
Right.
And, you know, and sometimes you don't even ever have to talk to the person again, but
That's true.
it does. It's such a freeing thing. And the Bible says about forgiving your neighbor 70 times 7, you know, and the guy's like, how many times do I got to forgive this person, you know?
70 times 7.
And, but with that, I do want to speak on, there's a point of like forgiving, and especially with people that you had to continuously like see, you know what I mean? And be in a relationship with for whatever reason, but like family members, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can opt out of going to the barbecue, but at the end of the day, you're probably going to run into them again. And whether they changed or not, like, again, that's not your responsibility or, you know, up to you. But I love that it says, like, how many times do I have to forgive this person, you know?
Right.
And he's like, 7 times. And the Lord's like, no, like 70 times 7
Right.
in a day. Like, it's not like in a lifetime. It's like in a day. 70 times 7, I don't know how much that is, but that's a lot. And so, but I think that there's also like a point where, like, I went to therapy and I was talking about this and I said, but like, where is that limit? Does that make sense? Because there can be a point where we can be like, okay, like, I'll forgive you this time. I'll forgive you this time. I'll forgive you this time. Does that make sense? But there's also a part of the responsibility part is now you have to do something about not having that be a repetitive thing too. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I feel
like once it gets to a point where it's robbing you of something, and that's what we were talking about in this situation of like overstepping almost like your boundary, like what you believe in and stuff like that. Like you also have that responsibility to like maneuver yourself. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
No, that makes sense. It definitely makes sense. What you're saying. When we hold on to a grudge, sometimes we feel like we're in control.
Okay, yeah.
But when really it is in control of us. Okay. So Pastor Vlad, I watch him on YouTube. He's awesome. He said, forgiveness is a process which a person is released from their consequences of an action against another person and is restored to a positive relationship to the offending party. And I thought that was really good. And he also followed that up with saying, like, forgiveness, like, is not optional.
Right.
Right? As Christians, we are supposed to forgive, right? I think anybody, even if you're not Christian, right? Like, it's not optional. It's something that God says that we need to do because, like, Jesus is a great example, right? When they were like nailing him on the cross, right? Like, and they were like calling him names, he forgave them, right? Even though they were really rude, right? He still forgave them. So even when he was in his hardest times, he was like forgiving them. It's almost like, you know, so we should forgive regardless, right? It's not an option as Christians, or I feel like as anybody, you should always forgive. And when you forgive someone, you open like a portal for them to like accept love from God, right? And it becomes about like that person. It's almost easier for that person to change when you've fully forgiven them, right? Because we're not perfect. We've made mistakes type of thing. So, like, I will, you know, just kind of piggybacking off of, like, what you were saying, like, I feel like we don't have an option but to forgive because, like, Christ did all of that for us, right? And he wants us to just forgive, right? And even, you know, Jesus was saying here in Matthew 6 that I just read, verses 14 and 15, that like if you don't forgive, God might not forgive you, right? So like if you're not going to forgive, then
Right.
like your blessings can be taken away. So you're in a sense holding yourself back. That's why we say forgiveness is not really for the other person.
Right.
Sometimes
It's not.
it's for you, right? Because God says, I've forgiven you, even though you've killed somebody, right? Or whatever the situation
Right,
may be, or you've hurt somebody, or you've lied and you've steal. Like, I've forgiven you. How come, like, you're not forgiving other people? So that's why forgiveness is such a must when it comes to us, right? But I think we get really stuck in like the feeling and the emotions and like, well, you did this to me this time or how many times, and we kind of lose sight of like what we really should be doing.
Right.
I think for me, when I got to that point where I got caught up in like the feelings and the emotion, and why I should forgive you, I had to get on my knees and pray and say, Lord, okay, I obviously don't see this person in a good light. So I need you to help me see them
The way you see them.
right? Because then I will be a little bit more compassionate in
Right,
that sense.
totally.
And you know what? God has done that. He has done such a great job of making me see that person in that light, right? Because we tend to see them in a dark and negative light, especially when they've done something to hurt us. And so it's like moving that barrier, right?
Right.
Because God moves that barrier with us. No matter what we've done, he still sees us in this amazing, beautiful light. And, you know, you got to move that veil or whatever
Right.
you want to call
Yeah.
it so you can see that
I always
person
see
in
it
that
like
light.
glasses. Like you
Right.
have to like just put on a different lens, and then God will definitely let you see the other side of things. And that's where the like responsibility part comes in, because he'll also show you who you are too.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. And we forgive people because we're saved, right? And we're not perfect, but it's really hard. It's really hard to see other people in a positive light, especially when they're giving you negative and they're giving you manipulations and they're giving you lies and they're saying all these things and you're like, whatever, right? It is so hard to see them in that light because we're so stuck in ourselves in that moment. And that's where Jesus comes in, right? And him dying on the cross for us. And yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. No, that's really good.
Yes, yes, yes. Forgiveness is essential, right? We need to do it. God needs us to do it. Obviously, it's super important that we do it. I'm sorry about my ghetto notes, but this is what I have. Okay, I do apologize about it.
It works.
Forgiveness is receive. Forgiveness is something we need to make sure that we are really cautious about, because I think sometimes we're not cautious about it. We're so quick to like jump
Right.
to the negative. So we need to make sure that we're very, very like cautious about it. Okay. So I just jot some stuff down. I'm going to go through on my list that I wanted to share. So people who have hurt you, you need to forgive them, okay? So regardless, because we're Christians and God's like, okay, we need to forgive, and because we are saved, we need to do that. And we kind of covered that a little bit, right? Forgiveness benefits you, obviously, right? It helps you be free, like we talked in the beginning, right? Gives you freedom and healing. And when your heart is clear and you've forgiven, your prayers will be answered. And people don't understand that sometimes your prayers are not.
It's a prayer block.
Yeah, it's a block.
It's just empty void.
Right. So, you know, you have all this hate in your heart, you're upset, and you're praying and you're wondering, oh, God's not answering me.
Right.
Like, sometimes we have to stop and check ourselves and not blame God. Oh, you don't love me. You're not answering me.
Right.
Right. We need to check ourselves. Have I forgiven? Do I have any hate in my heart? Right.
Right.
You made a great comment the other day. I was going to do this crazy fast, and you're like, make sure your heart is clear and pure and clean type of thing before you do it. Right. You can't do something pertaining to God with hate in your heart type of thing. So that's something I jotted down. Okay.
You're like, it's part of my notes.
Forgiveness is not overlooking what's wrong, right?
Right.
Excusing wrong or taking somebody else's blame.
Right.
And I think we have to realize that a lot of people sometimes will forgive and then they will like, well, I did, or, sometimes
Yes,
they
you
kinda
overly, that's what I meant by
Right.
like taking responsibility for the other person is you
Right.
almost like overly take responsibility
Right.
to where now you feel guilty.
guilty.
And now and when you do that, it's so easy to allow the enemy to come in, and now it's not just forgiveness, but now you're carrying guilt.
Right.
And when you carry guilt,
I agree.
that is like a whole other giant to deal
Right.
with. You know what I mean? Because guilt and shame go together. You know what I mean? And sometimes when you feel shame, when you feel guilt, you will hide.
Right.
And instead of, being able to show that light and share the light, you don't. You will be dimmed, and it will be a big burden to carry, and it will weigh you down.
Right. I agree.
I feel like guilt and shame will definitely like keep you bondage and hostage. And when you feel that way, you're literally handing over the power to this person, if you may say a person, but not even them, because they really, like, half of the time they don't even know how much you're really feeling. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like, that person's out living their life. Like, they really have no idea of how guilty, how ashamed you feel, or if you have unforgiveness. They have no idea, like, what you're really going through.
Right.
But you do give that control, literally, like, I think of a TV control
Right.
to, like, the enemy. You know what I mean? And you're just like, here you go, like, press all the buttons because you're right, and then you start believing all the lies
Right.
that the devil's feeding into you. He's like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, you are a bad person. You know what? Yeah, you do suck at texting people back. Yeah, you know what? You do suck as a leader.
Right.
Oh yeah, like, and then now because you're carrying that shame and guilt, now it's like you're believing the lies instead of believing the truth.
Right.
Right.
I agree 100%.
So you have to be, I don't know, like somewhat careful-ish, I
Right.
guess. Like, yes, obviously forgive, but like, be free,
Right. I agree.
And I don't know. I'm still unpacking that. Like, I don't know how to. Once you start seeing that guilt and those thoughts, forgive yourself.
Right.
Like, have God help you forgive you. You know what I mean? Hand that over to God. Like, Lord, forgive me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
For being right.
yeah, because
makes
once
sense.
that will rob you of your peace. It'll rob you of your love, and it'll rob you of everything good.
Yes. I agree 100%. Some of the other things I jot down was forgiveness is not waiting for an apology.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Ever.
Sometimes we tend to wait for apology before we forgive. That's
Sometimes
a
even
no-no.
an apology won't even. It almost sometimes like, not. I guess in some cases it could make it worse depending on how that person comes at you. But like, it's really, sometimes we think that's what we need, but it's really not what we need.
Right.
And if you get it, like a cherry on top.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
But
you shouldn't wait for apology.
It's really not
Right.
what we need.
Exactly. Exactly. And you said it too, forgiveness is not forgetting, right? You can forgive, but you don't have to forget, right? Forgiveness starts the healing process. And I said this earlier. Forgiveness starts the healing process, but it does not mean you are going to be healed immediately. We talked a little
totally.
bit
It
about
does
that.
take time.
But it does. Saying like, I forgive you starts that process, but it doesn't mean we're going to be healed immediately, because there are those triggers and stuff we talked about a little bit.
What are some things that like you do to help you forgive others? I think we like kind of asked that earlier, but
Some things that I do to help me forgive. It's like constant prayer and talking to myself, right? Like I said earlier, when that comes back to me, like when I get in that moment where there's a trigger, I'm just like, okay, no, Lord, this is not, this is just like a trigger and the devil putting that back into my head.
Right,
I've
for
already
sure.
forgiven that person and my heart wants to, but we have those moments where we're triggered and upset. So it's like a constant reminder,
And
constant
for
relying on
sure,
God.
like handing it over to him. Like I know when I've had to go through some serious stuff too, like, and even not so serious stuff, I always have to be like, all right, Lord, because it is like a sin to think bad about your neighbor, to not love your neighbor. Like that's the first thing, like love God and then love your neighbor as you love yourself,
Right.
So if you're not doing that, like you're basically in sin, right? And being able to confess that, oh Lord, here we go, like, and then always handing that over. And I remember going through like this one specific time, that one was so hard for me to let go of. And I would cry and I would get upset and I would still freak out at that person. You know what I mean? But it didn't make it okay.
Right.
But I would still bring it back to God and be like, okay, the way I acted was way completely out of character. And through confessing it every single time, the Lord helped me to manage that. You know what I mean? Right. And not just manage it, but get to a point where it's not even an issue anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that constant confessing of my sin, right. Of Lord, here we go. Right. I'm mad. I really thought I could handle it. I thought I could really have a conversation, but I can't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's so crazy. But anyways, we won't get into like too many crazy topics. But I think another thing that has helped me with forgiveness has been writing things down.
That's a good one.
Girl, my journal has like so many things. And sometimes I will completely get rid of the page, but I will write down everything. Like, and I don't do this every day or anything, but if there is a situation where I can't, it's not like a simple like move along from it, but it really did hurt me, I will write it down and I will write down like the reason why I feel hurt, and then at the end, create a gratitude list of all the reasons why I am grateful for that person,
I love that.
Because through that,
that's a good one.
It's hard at first because you're like, I'm grateful that they're alive. I'm grateful that like they're in my life. At first it's like very basic stuff, but then I don't know, like the Holy Spirit just hits and is like, oh my gosh. And then by the end of it, like I'm actually grateful for that person. Right. You know what I mean? For the lessons that I've learned through them. There's always a reason why people are in your life, right? And there's this thing that I heard, if somebody comes within like a certain amount of like radius of you, it's for a reason,
right.
And so by the end of it, like you do. I definitely feel like so much more grateful. And I feel like personally for me, that's what's helped me. And there's times where like you want to tell that person a piece of your mind,
right.
Write it down.
Right.
Like sometimes I have to text it because it's in that moment, and then I'll just text everything I want to say and then I'll delete it.
Right.
But I reread it to make sure it's got everything. But there's something about like dumping it, deleting it, and then like doing the gratitude list.
Right. I love that. I'm going to have to do that. I haven't tried the gratitude list.
Yeah, it's hard at first because nobody wants to sit there and like do it. But once you do it, you have to at least minimum do 10, I feel like, because then after 10, then it's like...
It goes, because it's hard to find the
yeah,
first 10.
because at first you're like, I don't know.
I don't know about this.
Yeah, but then once you do it, it's like, okay, I'm actually very grateful.
I'm going to try the gratitude thing. I love it. This one was really good. It says, if you forgive, you can look at those things as a scar, not a wound.
Yeah.
So that was really good. Kids get hurt, right? They look back, oh, that sore was like when I did this, right? But it's a scar. It's done. It's over with. You've moved on. You remember it. You don't forget it, like we were saying with forgiveness, but you're able to look back and not feel those same feelings or be upset. So forgiveness is not a one-time event. We talked about that, right? Forgiveness does not mean you can trust that person,
Right.
right? Forgiveness is free. Trust is not. Okay? I'm going to just leave it there because I can go on with that one. Forgiveness, let's see. My note page end over here. Let me go back here. Forgiveness is a gift, and I think that really stuck out to me. It's a gift, right? And so I kind of started thinking about it in a way like, and I know this probably might sound weird, and people's like, oh, you think you can just gift everyone, you know?
Right, yeah.
But I kind of look at it as like, forgiveness is a gift. That is something I'm going to give, right? And
Yeah.
I am a person who have really struggled with forgiveness.
It's like a tool.
Yeah, it's a gift. Like, why wouldn't you want to give somebody the opportunity to heal?
Right.
Right? That's what forgiveness is. Kind of giving somebody the opportunity to heal. Forgiveness does not change the past, right? But it will change your future.
Oh, totally.
Right? And how you move forward with things, it would definitely change, especially when you learn how to forgive, right? And if you're not moving forward and you're struggling and you're stagnant, it's because you have to kind of look at yourself and say, have I forgiven?
Right.
Do you have anything? I'm sorry. I feel like
No,
I'm just
go
going.
on, girl,
I'm
go
just going. I personally struggle with forgiveness, right? It's been really one of the hardest thing in my life till I would say 6 months ago, right? I realized I was just stagnant. I wasn't moving. You know, I'm a great person and I do good things. Like, I work hard. I love people. I love God, and I've changed my life, and I still feel like nothing's really changed in my life, right? And so I had to take a step back. Obviously, counseling, right? I've done a lot of counseling, and I've talked to a lot of church leaders and gotten a lot of feedback and just how to better myself. And in that process, right, taking classes, I realized that there's a lot of things that I haven't let go of
Right.
and I haven't forgiven. And so that's why I wasn't able to move forward. I wasn't able to move forward in my life. I wasn't able to move forward like in my marriage, and I wasn't able to move forward with God.
Right.
And once I was able to figure that out and forgive, that's where the healing came, right? The blessings, the answer to my prayers. So this was a really good topic because I can relate.
Yeah, and I think
To it.
we all can.
Yeah,
We
every
all,
single
every
person.
day, you know, every day
Yeah,
we can
awesome. But
use
Yep.
some forgiveness.
Yep.
Oh. No,
Is there anything you want to say
No.
before we finish? Okay, awesome. I just kind of want to leave everybody with, you know, just for the topic of on forgiveness, just don't live in a world where you're upset with others and you're upset about something someone has done to you. Forgive them. It's so important to make sure that we're forgiven because it is for you. And you're giving that other person the opportunity to change and be better. I know that feeling. I know that feeling of being upset and not wanting to let go and, you know, saying, well, it's not my fault. Just remember why Jesus died on the cross for us, right? He's given us that opportunity to be better and have a second, third, fourth chance. So let's not be so harsh of giving it to others. So, you know, those are my last words. So,
It's beautiful.
yeah. Remember to be bold
Be brave.
and be better. See you guys soon.